Amazing facts you didn't know, part 3. There are more than 1 million ants for every person on Earth. The longest underwater kiss lasted 20 minutes and 11 seconds. Stubbs, this orange cat, was the mayor of Tahkeetna, Alaska for 20 years. Stephen King bought the car that nearly hit and killed him in 1999 and smashed it with a sledgehammer. The Empire State Building has its own zip code. You can see 4 different states from the top of Willis Tower in Chicago. If you go to a McDonald's in the Philippines, you can order a McSpaghetti combo. Google was nearly called back rub. It's impossible to hum while holding your nose. Try it out and follow for more facts.
He made the man to be a man. He didn't make the woman to be a man. He made the woman to be a woman. And this is the truth. What are you going to do? Come attack me now? I should. Hey, man. That's up to you. If you want to pull that well, God bless you. So you just threatened me with a gun. You just pulled a gun on my face. Man, Lord have mercy on you. This means that you don't even know who you are.
Stop scrolling because this has to be one of the scariest Skinwalker encounters ever. Reddit user Troutmaster said that his ward at church purchased a piece of land. It was a wooded area with a little bit of swamp. When he was a teenager, him and his buddies would always go there for campouts. And at night, when it was pitch black, they would all play manhunt. One time, they all got down to one person whose name was David. They had split up and gone deep into the forest towards the swamp because it seemed like it was impossible to find him. They thought that he might have gone a little bit further than they usually went. They started getting into some more muddy and wet terrain. As they got closer to the swamp-like area, they saw David out in the swamp. He wasn't wearing any shirt, and with the spotlight on him, he looked super pale. He just stood there and didn't say a word. You could seriously tell that something was off. Then, all of a sudden, they heard David from behind them yelling and trying to get their attention, which meant that what they saw in front of them wasn't David. They yelled and ran back to the campsite as fast as they could.
Seemingly normal photos with disturbing backstories, part 1. This photo shows Apollo 1 astronauts praying as a joke, and not a single one of them returned back to Earth. This is a photo of a man smiling in the trenches during the war, but he wasn't smiling because he was happy. He was smiling due to shell shock and borderline insanity. This just looks like 3 girls taking a selfie, but the light in the background is actually a train which hits and ends all their lives just seconds later.
Creepy photos that can't be explained. This photo was taken in the basement of a house that was for sale a few years ago. The photo was taken by a realtor because he wanted to show his clients the house. Everything looks completely normal in this house until you look at the left corner. What appears to be a fairly transparent woman is standing towards the bottom of the stairs going to the basement. The realtor insists that nobody was there when he took the photo, but the strangest part about this photo lies in the backstory of this house. The house was previously owned by a man and his wife, but unfortunately the wife passed away, so the husband decided to sell. Another reason why the man wanted to sell his house is because after his wife passed, he kept hearing strange noises in the middle of the night while home alone. What do you guys think? Who or what was captured on camera? Like and follow for more.
Do you ever see a picture that just makes your stomach drop? This is a screenshot from a security alert that a woman named Alexis Randall received on her phone. It came from a security camera that was set up in her living room, but she's staring at the image and she's wondering the same thing you are. There's nothing there. What's wrong with this picture? Why did the motion detector go off? But then look a bit closer, specifically at the bathroom doorway. This man who was staring at the camera from the doorway. The moment she saw this, she immediately panicked and called the police, but by the time the officers arrived, the man was gone. What terrified her even more was that investigators discovered that the bathroom window had been tampered with. Additional security footage showed that the man had actually climbed through that window the night before and had been hiding in the hallway bathroom the entire time, even while she was at home.
Pictures of extremely unsettling things, part 1. Caves aren't just creepy and dangerous on land. Check out the sign to an entrance of an underwater cave. Prevent your own unaliving. Go no further. More than 300 divers, including water scuba dive instructors, have been unalived here. There is nothing in this cave worth becoming unalived for. Do not go beyond this point. Don't forget to like and follow for a part 2.
A mum who wrote a book to help her own children deal with the grief of the death of their father has just been arrested on suspicion of his murder. Curry Richards was arrested on Monday on suspicion of poisoning her husband Eric in their home last year in Kamas, Utah. The night Eric died, Richards said she made him a Moscow Mule drink and gave him a THC gummy, allegedly to celebrate selling a property as part of their real estate business. She then apparently went to soothe one of her children before coming back to find him passed out and stone cold around 3 a.m. The medical examiners said they found 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system, a painkiller which is 100 times more powerful than morphine. Following Eric's death, Curry actually wrote Are You With Me?, a children's picture book aimed at little kids to help them deal with the death of a loved one. She did television interviews, editorial articles, but now it looks like police think she was the one who in fact killed her children's father. Now, the motive around the alleged murder has not been confirmed, but she did change herself on Eric's life insurance to be the sole beneficiary before he died. And in a shocking discovery, a warrant actually claims Eric noticed this and changed that back as well as his power of attorney and handed it over to his sister in complete secret without his wife finding out. Why? He was allegedly scared she would kill him for the money. Court documents have shown that Richards bought $900 worth of fentanyl pills just before a Valentine's Day meal where Eric became really sick and suffered an allergic reaction but luckily survived. However, 2 weeks later, she brought another $900 worth of fentanyl pills when days later, he died of an overdose. This is a shocking story with a lot more details. To hear all about it, head to dailymail.com.
So you like anything creepy, but have you heard of Ayuwoki? In 2012, a YouTube channel named Thomas Ringstorff posted a series of videos under the name Michael Jackson dedicated to showcase an animatronic inspired by Michael Jackson. This animatronic was named El Ayuwoki, aka El Hihi. His creation was to honor Michael Jackson during his Thriller era. This video became so popular that in 2019, a gaming studio called Deadly Crow Games made a video game called Escape the Ayuwoki. Now, I don't know about you, but this video is just so creepy and I cannot imagine having this animatronic in my home.
Shh! Stay still. Stay still.
Now, if you think that woman's overreacting, then you really have no idea what she's up against. It's arguably the most dangerous animal the average American has never heard of. Alright, enough fluff. Those are javelinas. Also known as peccaries, they look like desert pigs. They're actually from a different family. They're the mascot of a sleeper build. They might look like some extra seasoned bacon, but they'll put you in a perma nap if you press them. The reason why? Those right there. They have tusks, and tusk stands for terrier like Kruger. Every year, people get sent to the ER after getting gored by this aggressive not a pig. One woman got mauled, and the peccary tore all the tendons in her arm to where she couldn't move her fingers. But it could have been worse because they're about yay high. If they catch the wrong part of your leg and sever your femoral artery, then you are to be an obituary. You cooked, my guy. Like most animals, they're not out here looking for fays, but there's 2 good ways you can get got, and one is if you get too close to their spawn. They will run up on you in the name of parenthood. Speaking of run, as fast as you think they are faster. But things can get real critical if you're walking your dog. Why? Well, javelinas have a lot of predators. One of them are coyotes. And what's a dog to a peccary with canine bias? Yeah, your pet can get profiled and get y'all both packed up, and also since they travel in groups called squadrons, you can really get packed up by a squad of swine. Also, they have poor eyesight, so any movement can be a threat. So if you're ever in the US Southwest and peep a peccary, you're gonna want to keep your distance, make noise so they can avoid you, and if it gets close, throw something not at them, but near them. And remember, most injuries come from people walking into them or even feeding them, so mind your manners, you'll probably be alright. The more you know.
Times when psychics helped solve crimes. On May 15, 1976, 14-year-old Susan Jacobson left her home to go to a job interview at an ice cream parlor, but she never came back. Susan's parents contacted the police, but the police said she probably just ran away with her boyfriend Dempsey Hawkins, and they refused to search for her. 2 weeks later, Susan's parents contacted a psychic, Dorothy Allison, to help with the case. Dorothy asked what the word Mar meant, claiming she saw it in red spray paint. She also envisioned an abandoned car, dual church steeples, the smell of oil, and claimed that Susan had been strangled to death by her boyfriend. Then 2 years later, 3 boys stumbled across Susan's body as they were hunting. At the site was the word Mar spray painted in red on a rock, dual church steeples, an abandoned car, and 2 oil drums which contained Susan's body. Plus, evidence at the scene showed that Susan had been strangled by her boyfriend Dempsey Hawkins, who was then sentenced to 22 years to life in prison.
AI art is not something that's terribly new, but have you heard about the woman that is haunting AI pictures? This is the face, and nobody can explain why she keeps showing up in AI images. If you look at her, she's not really general. I mean, there are specific characteristics here that are consistent. Again, nobody knows which prompts are generating this woman. Nobody knows why her face continues to appear in different models. So this has opened up one of my favorite questions about the idea that AI pictures can be haunted. And don't forget, if things like this are of interest to you, make sure to go check out the podcast.
This creepy mystery will leave you very confused. Cape Elizabeth is a normal American town in the state of Maine. But in 2005, there were some weird things going on in the area. Several residents claimed to have been waking up in the middle of the night to see a strange man staring back at them in their bedroom. But before they could react, he would vanish. Many members of the town went to the police and described the man that they saw. And oddly enough, they all gave the same description. This is the face of the man who everyone claimed to see in their rooms at night. This sketch was featured on the local news, and several people around the area called in with suspects. However, the police never arrested anybody, and the man was never seen again. So what do you think happened?
Do you guys know the story behind the Amber Alert? On January 13th, 1996, 9-year-old Amber Hagerman rode her bike with her little brother Ricky 2 blocks away from her grandmother's house. Suddenly, a man in a black pickup truck approached Amber and forced her into his vehicle. The only witness to Amber's abduction was a 78-year-old man named Jim Kevill, who immediately contacted police and notified them. Amber's little brother Ricky does not remember much of what happened that day, but he does recall riding his bike back home and his sister not being behind him. 5 days later, Amber's lifeless body was found in a nearby creek, and 26 years later, her murder remains unsolved. When Amber went missing, there was no available notification system to alert the public of Amber's kidnapping. 9 months later, the Amber Hagerman Child Protection Act was passed, leading to the start of the Amber Alert system. The case has never gone cold, and police continue to work on finding the person responsible for Amber's abduction and murder. Amber would have been 35 years old today.
It's what she finds in the kitchen that's really scary. In the early 90s, a young girl was sleeping in her mom's bed when she suddenly woke up for no reason. She looked at her door and she saw her very affectionate cat kind of meowing down the hall as if someone was coming up to pet it, but she was next to her mom and they were the only ones in the house. The girl shakes her mom awake and points to the cat just as a man is walking past the door and disappears into the room across the hall. Before the man could come back out and find them, they both jump out the window, run across the street, and call the police. When the police arrived, the guy is nowhere to be found, but they do discover that the front door was unlocked, so that had to be the way he got in and out. But the mother swears up and down that she locked that door before she went to bed. A week later, the mother's cleaning their kitchen and she opens up the water heater closet where she finds this notebook that inside is their names and pictures of them in it, along with a pair of surgical gloves. Which means someone had snuck in at some point, was living in that closet spying on them, and then walking around their house at night.
Scary facts that you didn't know about the Ghostface Killer. So the first movie that the Ghostface Killer was actually in was called Scary Movie. If you guys have never seen it, it's pretty much like a scary parody movie. It's very, very funny. It's also got a little bit of scariness in it. It's a 10 out of 10 watch. I think it's really funny. But this movie is actually based on a true story. It's based on a 1990s murder case where 5 people were actually killed. Hence the reason they shoot the movie in high school, the first one where he's actually in the movie. They base it off of high school instead of completely copying it from college. And the man who actually killed those kids was Danny Rowland, 36 years old. He was sentenced to death. Did you guys know that when this movie first aired, a ton of people were super scared because of the fact that he calls you and there's no caller ID? That they actually invested in getting caller IDs. There was millions and millions of people who were freaking out once it dropped. I mean, shit, I would have done the same thing. But every single horror movie, Scream has the highest body count. He has killed the most people in any scary movie. That's a freaking record in itself. For one of the most goriest horror movies, when they were first making the movie, they were afraid that it wasn't going to sell because of how much violence, blood, and guts it is. If you guys have never seen these movies, I really suggest you guys checking them out.
It's not every day that a serial killer goes out of their way to apologize for crimes they've committed or to go out of their way to save an innocent man for being blamed for the murders that the serial killer actually did. The only problem here is the serial killer let the other guy off scot-free by murdering the judge who was putting the innocent man on trial. This man, Will Graham, was accused of being the Chesapeake Ripper, who allegedly not only murdered several people, dismembered them, and ate their organs. The only problem, Will Graham was not the Chesapeake Ripper, but his bestie and psychiatrist Hannibal Lecter was the Chesapeake Ripper. And Hannibal Lecter's actually the one that framed Will Graham in the first place. Hannibal wanted to get off scot-free, he needed somebody to take the fall for him. But he realized during the trial while seeing Will locked up that he actually really cared for Will and didn't want to see him take the fall for this. So he causes a mistrial by murdering the judge in a style in which only the Chesapeake Ripper would know to do. He completely knocks the top of the judge's head off of his body, takes out his brain and heart, and makes the judge's body hold it in like a balance, and strings him up in the courtroom for everyone to find when they're coming in for the verdict. This causes a mistrial and saves Will Graham's life. The killer wrote you a poem, Will. Are you going to let his love go to waste? Which I think is another big reason why the heart and the brain are in the balance in the judge's hand. Because Hannibal Lecter knows logically that he should let Will take the fall, but his heart says, no, I love Will, I care for him a lot, and I don't want to see him get ripped away from me.
Imagine if your grandparents just disappeared, like completely without a trace. Welcome to Creep Time on TikTok with Silas Dean. This is the haunting story of Charles and Catherine Romer. On April 8th of 1980, a wealthy elderly couple named Charles and Catherine check into a Holiday Inn right off I-95. They're just on their way home from a vacation. But to put this in context, this wasn't a usual choice for them. These were two very well-off people, so to choose a Holiday Inn, it wouldn't have been typical of them. But not long after checking into their room, the couple seemingly vanished. After 2 or 3 days, hotel management became concerned that they hadn't seen the couple leave their room, so they went to go check on them. This was only to find that their room had never been slept in. Inside the room were all of their clothes, their travel diary, and over $60,000 of Catherine's jewelry. Hotel staff then goes out to the parking lot and finds that their car is missing, but no one ever saw them leave. At the time, only one witness comes forward saying that they saw this car miles away at a restaurant circuit, but after they interviewed people at the restaurant, nobody remembered seeing this couple. Despite search efforts, they were never found after that night, and no one really knows what happened to them.
Let's talk about more of the worst things someone's confessed to before passing. This brings us to the town of Dayton, and for 17 years, they were left wondering what happened to Christine Kett. So on a cold and snowy afternoon, a real long time ago, on January 11th of 1967, neighbors of Miss Christine Kett, so in this story, there's Mama Christine Kett, and there's daughter Christine Kett, and daughter Christine Kett has a brother. So the brother arrives home from work to find his 18-year-old sister in the floor, her head's been bashed in. There's blood all over this kitchen floor. There was a pew-pew found next to her which had not been fired off, and there were also pieces of her skull found nearby. So Mama Christine arrives on scene, gets kind of caught up with what happened. She was supposedly on a shopping trip all day and no one's seen her since the morning. So Mama Christine, her boyfriend, and the brother are all questioned, but they're let go. I mean, this is the 1800s, it's, you know. This case goes cold for 17 years. People are left wondering what happened to Christine until March of 1884 when Mama Christine gets real sick and she calls her son to her side. Mama Christine confesses that daughter Christine was supposed to be whipping up supper, but she got home late, so the argument escalates and escalates till Mama Christine picks up an axe and starts bashing daughter Christine's head with it. This was a complete sneak attack, and daughter Christine stands no chance. She passes almost immediately, and then Mama Christine's like, oh, I need an alibi, so she says, what better alibi than that I was shopping? Mama Christine also makes him promise to not tell the cops what happened until he's about to pass, but after his mom passes, he goes to the cops and tells them what happened. Supposedly, the locals weren't too surprised about this because at the funeral, Mama Christine ain't shed a single tear, so that's pretty scary.
On February 17th, emergency responders responded to an emergency at a Waterbury, Connecticut home. When they got there, they found a 32-year-old man who had been locked in his room since he was 11 years old by his stepmother. According to the man, his stepmother, Kimberly Sullivan, had him locked in a room and was only giving him sandwiches 2 times a day, and she's been doing that for the past 20 years. The man's father had passed away and his birth mother was never in the picture, and therefore he was left with Kimberly Sullivan. Now, back when he was a child, the police were called and Child Protective Services were called from the school on Kimberly on multiple occasions, and no one intervened on behalf of the child. And now this man was found inside of the room 20 years later. He is so frail and thin and gone through so much that he is traumatized. And this woman acts as if she's surprised by the charges. According to the victim, he purposely set the house on fire so he would be found, stating that he wanted his freedom from her. When emergency responders found the man, he only weighed 68 pounds. And according to the victim, he was locked inside of that room for 20 years for 22 hours a day. The victim stated that he was only let out the room to complete chores, and multiple times he was forced to drink toilet water because he was so thirsty. And this woman shows up to court with a cross on her chest.
So I'm obsessed with the dark side of Disney. And did you know there's a horrible period of accidents at Disneyland that doesn't really get talked about a lot? It's been referred to as the Disney Dark Ages. It was from 1997 to 2003 when this guy, Paul Pressler, was the president of Disneyland. Paul basically decided they were no longer going to do scheduled maintenance on rides. They were only going to fix rides when they were broken. Did it save money? Sure, but this resulted in some of the worst accidents the park had ever seen. One of the worst being that of Brandon Zucker. In 2001, Brandon Zucker was on the Roger Rabbit ride, which was already having maintenance issues. An employee put Brandon on the wrong side of the car, and when he put the lap band down, it didn't close all the way. So at one point in the ride, Brandon tumbled out of his seat and was hit by an oncoming car. The car pinned him and dragged him down the track before anyone could do anything. Also, at the time, Disney employees were not allowed to call 911. They had to call park emergency services, who then called 911, so it took a while for anyone to come get Brandon. He did survive the accident, but he had brain damage so bad he was nonverbal and lost a lot of motor skills for the rest of his life. And eventually he passed away at 13 years old. This photo is terrifying, but not for the reason you think. Sure, it does look like Abraham Lincoln is giving his wife a back massage from the afterlife, and that is spooky. But this woman here, Mary Todd Lincoln, was into some really witchy stuff and is the reason that the White House is haunted. Let me explain. And before we dive in, tonight's episode is all about hauntings of the White House, so you don't want to miss it. So when the Lincolns were in the White House, their youngest son, Willie, died of typhoid fever. He was only 11 when he died, and Mary, who was already suffering from mental health issues, was inconsolable when he died. And in her grief and desperation, she started holding seances in the White House. At first they were harmless. She would just conjure the ghost of Willie, whose ghost actually still haunts the White House today. But then they started getting out of control, and Mary was calling all sorts of ghosts into the White House. Guests would hear stomping and swearing come from nowhere. One person said they even heard Andrew Jackson playing the violin once. And the White House stayed haunted after she stopped doing these seances. When William Howard Taft was president, his aides said that they were being tormented by a ghost they called the Thing. And one woman who thought she saw it actually said it looked like a young boy. So when you see this photo, it may look like a gag, but Mary was up to some really witchy stuff in the White House. Be sure to tune in tonight for more spooky stories and history.
Another cold case has been solved as a woman who has been missing for 25 years was reunited with her father this week. On October 5th, 1999, 2-year-old Andrea Reyes was abducted by her mother, Rosa Tenorio, who did not have custody of her. Her father, Carlos, had custody, but her mother abducted her and she was never found. Police believed that she had taken the girl to Mexico, but she could not be located. Carlos went there multiple times searching for Andrea, and he could never find her. The FBI and New Haven, Connecticut police issued a felony arrest warrant for her mother, but the case unfortunately went cold and Andrea and her mother could not be located. Her case was entered into the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System and was considered a cold case for years. Investigators released at least 3 age-progressed photos of her over the years, the last in 2020. But her case still remained cold until 2023, when the New Haven Police Department's Special Victims Unit reviewed cold cases and took on the Reyes case. Investigators working on the case used interviews, search warrants, and social media to find out where the girl's mother had taken her. Now 27 years old, Andrea Reyes was located in Puebla, Mexico. During the renewed search, a woman contacted a man who she believed was her father. The New Haven Police Department worked with the DNA testing company Othram to see how closely the two were related. And Othram compared the woman's DNA sample to her potential father's DNA sample, and on March 4th, they confirmed that he is her father. And then it was determined that that woman was the missing 2-year-old from 1999, Andrea Reyes. A detective was able to establish contact with Andrea, and after confirming the match to her father, put her in contact with him. They have spoken now for the first time in over 20 years. There is still an active warrant out for the girl's mother, Rosa Tenorio, who allegedly kidnapped her. But she is believed to be in Mexico, and the warrant is only valid in the US. But Carlos is so happy to finally have answers and have his daughter back. Carlos and his wife, Lucia, thanked police, federal authorities, and missing persons groups for all their help. Currently, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children is helping to prepare the father and daughter for an in-person reunion. While no arrests have been made and there's no real justice served, at least now Andrea finally has her father back, and he has her.
This high school senior buried her baby in the backyard and got away with it. This is Brooke Skylar Richardson, and she was born on March 9th of 1999 and is from Ohio. Brooke had found out she was pregnant during her senior year of high school. She was at her doctor's office when she found out she was going to be giving birth in just a couple of weeks, and supposedly she went throughout her whole pregnancy without knowing she was pregnant. Hearing this news, she cried out loud that she was not prepared at all to have a baby, and she begged that doctor to please give her some birth control, even though she was already pregnant. With this news, she decided she was going to keep it a secret from all of her family and all of her friends. Before giving birth, she did some Google searches, and 2 of those Google searches were how to not have a baby and how to get rid of a baby. On May 5th of 2017, Brooke attended her senior prom, and within 48 hours, she gave birth in the bathroom of her parents' home. That is when she decided she was going to bury the baby in the backyard of her parents' home. Since the 6th grade, Brooke had suffered from an eating disorder, so the next morning after the delivery, she was at the gym and she texted her mom that she was so happy because her belly was finally going back to normal. For about 2 months, the baby remained buried in the backyard, and she didn't tell anyone what happened. Brooke eventually had an appointment with her doctor, and that is when she admitted that she gave birth and buried the baby in the backyard. And once the doctor found out about that, they reported it to the police. On July 14th of 2017, the baby's skeletal remains were dug up from the backyard. The initial autopsy revealed that the baby was partially charred and died of homicidal violence. In a recorded interview with police, they had came up with the idea that Brooke may have tried to do a cremation for the baby, and later on, Brooke agreed that she did try. A psychologist had diagnosed Brooke with a dependent personality disorder, and he believed that this disorder may have led her to make a false confession. After trial, Brooke was not convicted on the more serious charges because prosecutors could not prove their case. Brooke was able to go to college, and she ended up working part-time at a law firm, and these are the people that had represented her in court. Her probation had ended in 2020, but it was supposed to last for 2 more years.